Welcome to Without Regret, the podcast. This podcast is for people who are looking for inspiration to overcome obstacles in life and want to see that it is possible to live your best life and become successful, whatever that means to you, regardless of your circumstances. Hear from me and my guests as we share our stories of perseverance. My name is Tamara, and I'm the host of Without Regret, the podcast. In this powerful and deeply personal podcast episode, we are joined by a courageous individual whose story of resilience and redemption will leave you inspired. My guest's journey begins in adolescence, where he turned to alcohol as a means to cope with life's challenges, mirroring the environment in which he was raised. Seeking confidence and social interaction, this choice seemed like the answer, but it led to a path of addiction as he soon found himself entangled in the allure of various drugs. Despite hitting rock bottom, Doug discovered that there was always another depth to plunge, demonstrating the relentless grip of addiction. Yet amidst the darkness, God's grace intervened. It became the lifeline that allowed him to tangibly experience and believe in real freedom. Through the transformative power of God's grace, Doug found the strength to break free from the shackles of addiction. His story is a testament to the boundless mercy and second chances that life can offer. Filled with gratitude for his newfound liberation, Doug now strives to guide and support other hurting individuals seeking the same path to freedom. Please welcome my guest, Doug Sweeney. Hello, Doug, and welcome to Without Regret, the podcast. How are you this evening?
I am good, Tammy. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. And I appreciate you being willing to come on here and share your story.
Yes, to the best I can. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's your story. I think you probably know it better than anyone else.
I do. Yes, I do. I do.
So you started with alcohol at a very young age. Do you want to start from there?
Yes. In a nutshell, I think a lot of us in life grow up in a dysfunctional, in some way, of family lifestyle. My family lifestyle was a lot of abuse, emotional, physical, verbal, every possible way in the angry sense. And so that's how I developed my young life, was walking on eggshells and, fearing how things would get broken or abuse might transpire again on another day. So I wanted to avoid that at all costs. I wanted to keep avoiding that and just hide in my bedroom and do the best I could to avoid that. And so that's what my childhood was. And I watched it. I watched my mother get abused all too often. I had me and my two brothers. We would be abused too if we did something wrong. It was not a regular consequence. It was just emotional and sometimes physical abuse. So my dad was a very heavy drinker. He was what the world calls a functional drinker. He never went to jail, although there were times, he very well easily should and could have. He never went to jail. He maintained his job. So I watched alcohol consume him and cause his recklessness and my upbringing. There was never a father-son relationship. I felt like he was a disappointed dad to have children that were always messing up. And so this was the mindset that I was developed into. And then so at a very young age, between 12, 13, and 14, I started to consume on a regular basis at age 13 and 14. And my tolerance went high fast. I soon moved to marijuana, but I didn't just stay with marijuana. I always drank. Drinking was my number one thing, even though it elevated into other drugs. By the time I was a young adult, I had numerous DUIs. I was going into the county jail and even into more severe lockup at a young age for short stints, between a year or less. And it was all caused by addiction. I would always come back out into another program, and a program that would call my problem a disease, and that it wasn't my fault. I really didn't have 100% accountability to it. And in my heart of hearts, I never accepted that. I never accepted that because it wasn't okay that I grew up under the illustration of 7-day-a-week drinking and abuse in my house. That wasn't okay, but it also didn't reform my moral compass of right and wrong, and therefore I didn't believe in alcoholism being a disease in my life. I just didn't believe that. I believe that because when I went to jail for more than 30 days and would come back out, I wasn't under some physical control of a withdrawal or anything. So I always had a choice. And then I would eventually always go back to my choice of using and try to figure out how to use in a functional way. But that just never worked for me. And as I go into this, you'll understand why. My biggest thing was I harbored so much anger and unforgiveness at my father for how he developed me and to walk and believe that I was shameful. And so this is how I used. I used from the way that I felt, even though when I used, I wasn't an abusive person. I wasn't mean and screaming and demeaning like he was, but I still disappointed and hurt people who did care for me and who also always saw potential in me. So through my history of drinking, and usually drinking and driving because I was raised to see that every day of my life too, I started getting into some very serious accidents. My final accident that I got into was an accident that not even a real close friend, but a fellow acquaintance and I had went to a bar for the night, and he was allowing me to take him home after we closed the bar, and I did not make taking him home. We had a horrible accident in which he was killed instantly on the first roll of the car. The car rolled uncountable times. So I was in critical condition as well. I was care flighted. He was a fatality at the scene. I was care flighted, flatlined on the way to the hospital, resuscitated, brought back. And then I was in the hospital, basically out unconscious in a coma, past his burial and everything. So I never saw, remember, knew of nothing. I want to be clear about that. This has been almost 20 years, and up until this day, I have no conscious memory of it. And God has pretty much assured me that it's not necessary to show me or to give me that physical memory. And I'm pretty grateful for that in reality, but I've never remembered this, even though I've relived the evidence. I've heard everything. It's all been just something that I've went through in my mind about what happened.
Do you remember leaving the bar and getting in the car, or do you not even remember that?
I don't even remember going to the bar with him that night at all.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Not at all. Yeah. So, anyway, I wake up in the hospital approximately 8 or 9 days later. It might have been 10 days. I can't remember for sure. And my mother is there again, not the first time in the hospital, not the first time having a horrible accident that nobody should have survived. But she's there just telling me what happened. I can't believe it. I have no recollection of it. So why could I believe something like that? And I'm thinking she's just, riddling me with this humongous load of fear. because I just done this horrible thing again. I got another accident where I'm waking up from a coma. It wasn't my first time. And so I couldn't believe it for several days until it finally, you know, I'm in the hospital for a couple months from all the injuries. And when I got out, I still couldn't believe it fully that I was the operator, because I've never been released from a hospital if I was the operator of a vehicle. I've always been taken straight to jail. If they can release me from the hospital, that's what I would expect to go, you know, immediately expect to happen, but it didn't. In this instance, there was no indictment at the time, so they let me go home. It was 3 months later after they, you know, finally indicted me for a very serious offense as a felony 2 of aggravated vehicular homicide. Aggravated because I was under the influence, and especially with my past record. Homicide because my occupant in the car, it was a 1-car accident, and he was a fatality in the very beginning of the accident. So I faced 8 years on this. I didn't know what was going to go on. All I knew is that my record was horrible. I had all the evidence against me, even though I had not seen this evidence or anything. I just didn't know what to do, because in my heart of hearts and in my conscience of all conscience, I don't have any remembrance of this. And I just don't know why I'm going through this and why I survived this. Why did I survive? That's where I was really not able to live with myself, because I couldn't believe that I didn't survive. I knew of this man. I knew a little bit about him on the surface level. And the things that I knew about him permitted him to live way more than me. He was someone who had not been given a fraction of the chances at life that I had already been given because of my addictive life pattern. Addiction done OD'd me. It done put me through windshields of cars. It done, you know, I've had alcohol poisoning. I've been brought back. I've already been in some of the darkest, deepest places of prison, of county jail, of all these things that addiction had done to me. And he had never went through any of that. And this man was 3 years older than me at the time. Not only that, the biggest factor of all that I'm about to touch base on is that this man was a father. He had a 9-year-old boy. His 9-year-old boy lived in my house because I dated his ex-wife. This is how I knew him. He was just an acquaintance. He wasn't a friend or an enemy, but he was at the time, my girlfriend's ex-husband. And so I readied his son's breakfast and lunches to take to school. So in my conscience of conscience, I'm going through this in my mind, not remembering nothing, that this man, this boy, this 9-year-old boy has lost his father at my hands operating a vehicle drunk again. And I am arguing. I've always had a God conscience. I've always believed in God, but I'm arguing and screaming and cussing and fighting with God as to why I'm alive and why did the victim have to go. And so keep this on account. So from the hospital to the 3 months that I got out of the hospital to when they got me with the indictment, and then in the first couple of weeks of county jail, I'm going through all this. And I just don't believe that I can even be forgivable. I think God has made a mistake to let me survive this. Well, how could I survive this when, you know, he has he had none of the grace that I had been given already. Nonetheless, I've been in the county jail for a couple weeks. There was a crazy day going on in the county jail, a bunch of loud argumentation, fighting, arguing over stupid, simple surface things. I wanted nothing to do with it. A correctional officer came by, offered for anybody who wanted to go to a Bible study to go to a Bible study. So I stepped right in. I want to get out of there. I figured a Bible study would be much more serene than what I was dealing with in the pod. And I went to this Bible study, was going for maybe an hour to an hour and a half, came back, and mail had been passed out. And while I was gone, a piece of mail had come for me. Wasn't really expecting mail or anything. And I got this letter, and this letter was from the victim's mother. And I already knew from, the 5 months, the 2 months in the hospital, and the 3 months out before getting locked up, I already knew that she wasn't really, that her son had made the choice that he made to ride with me. And she wasn't like batting my door down to have me hung or anything like that. She really wasn't. But it's what she wrote in this letter to me that was my answer that God knew my heart needed about how I could be forgivable. And she told me in the letter that an hour and a half after she had learned about her only son's death, he died instantly. He didn't suffer or anything. He was killed instantly on the first roll. That she stood with my mother at my bedside in ICU praying for my survival, because I had my brain bleeding. I had this temperature that was near death, and she was right there praying for my survival. This woman of God, she's a woman of God. She has been for decades and decades. But that's what she did. And all I had to do, I take her out of the equation in essence, because that was God answering me that I was forgivable. And it did something more than just give me an answer. It gave me a piece of healing. It allowed me to be forgiving of myself in a sense and then simultaneously, it did the same thing for me. It allowed me to somehow not hurt myself or want myself dead. It showed me, God in essence showed me that I was forgivable. I couldn't explain it or understand why, but that's how forgiving he was. And when he showed me that, he knew it was the right way, that he knew it was the way that he had to answer me in order for me to make the change that I made. And I believed that this would not be drug out this long if I really wasn't the operator. So I believed, even before looking at evidence, that most likely I am the operator and that I will be guilty of this crime. And I will probably get the majority of the time faced, because I know my record and I know my past. And I decided at that moment that I was not caring about that, but that God had came so close to me in that instant, in that letter, that I was going to go to prison again for a much longer period of time than I've ever been. And I was going to be looking in his word and learning how to build a relationship with him, because he, God of the universe, showed me love, mercy, and forgiveness in that letter. And so, a sequence of events went across through courts and everything. I had mentioned that it was a felony too. I faced 8 years. I ended up getting dropped down to an F3, same name of the charge, but I faced only 5 years and I got 4. I did all 4 years. I did an additional 10 months on another charge that was consecutive. So I did 4 years and 10 months. And in that time, I, very shortly after going into prison, I had probably been there less than a month and a half. One of the grounded, hugest pieces of learning that he brought to me, and it's funny how it worked out in the sequence he chose, because he showed me forgiveness, literally showed my conscience and my heart forgiveness. And then by the time I'm in prison, just very new on this case, he shows me that I have to forgive. And there was only one person I had to forgive, and that was my father.
Oh.
So it was amazing that he showed my heart that, but it also hurt me And it angered me because because what does the flesh think? The flesh thinks they don't deserve forgiveness. They did this, they ruined this many years, they caused all this stuff, things that will never be forgotten. And how can we forgive him? How can I forgive him? But it's not just scriptural. It's not just text in a book, forgive as thou hast been forgiven. But he has always meant true healing behind that. It was setting me free to forgive my father. I had to forgive him so I could be set free and then move forward with God and Jesus Christ. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I know exactly what you mean.
And he did that in the beginning of that 4-year and 10-month term. And it made that 4-year and 10-month term in a closed security penitentiary the best, freest time that I had ever had outside of that prison at that time. I had never been freer because I had to, and I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to forgive him, but just the fact that he let my heart know that that was something that had to be worked on and little by little in process do so, that's what enabled it to transpire. And, I took some tangible action steps. I wrote him, I called him, but in my heart of hearts, I just had to do it spiritually and in prayer with God. And that's where it was, because when I did it tangibly with Dad, then all he said was, for what? Forgive me for what?
Yeah.
And the flesh gets angry and wants to, fly off the handle at something like that, because we know what, but it was the essence of where I was able to move forward. And by doing that, I had the best routine. I had, one of the best jobs in there. I had chapel twice a week. I had Bible studies. I had outside and inside ministries coming in and out. I was involved. I stayed busy the entire time. And when I came out, I was faced with new challenges because it was about the recession. But that things have just, I've just grown so much when I realized how much effort I put towards addiction and substitute that in my walk with God. When I apply my walk with God and do the things that I do in my walk with God and always heed the Spirit, then I find myself, like, I was radical to figure out how to drink the highest alcohol content at the lowest price for the most amount. And when I do what I do now, is I look for how can I apply myself in the program at church or in the service of helping and baking for a ministry that is trying to help prostitute women or stripper clubs, be changed over for the transforming love of Christ. You know what I mean? Things like this, when I just do more than go to church on Sunday, like in sadness, like the majority of church, is about, it's just an attendance. But when I engage and apply myself and use the principles, so that's what I have done now. And it's taken me a while, but I had a team help me build a website to where I can help. And so my online business is dedicated to empowering and helping lead men, specifically men. I want to focus on who are broken and who either know they're in addiction or at least, suspect that they are from the symptoms of their life. And I want to do everything contrary to what the world does. I don't want to work on a step basis. I don't want to work on calling something, that the world calls it. I don't think ism is anywhere in God's word. And I don't think any of that. God calls it drunkard. And we have just translated so many things and diluted so much, so we're not to blame, so we don't have to confront it in full. So that's what I want to do. I want to help men, but I want to help them in the process that I became free. I'm not calling myself perfect, and I'm not saying I haven't had mistakes, and fallen, from here and there, but I know what God's word preaches, and I know what it says, and I know that He is the bondage breaker. He is the bondage breaker. My curriculum that I have for my site was the two things. Bondage is a mastery. It's an enslavement. It's a state of being bound. The bondage that I couldn't stand how I felt was my shame, was my lack of confidence. My father demeaned me. Everything I ever did was never good. It was less than just not good, though. It was like I was the most stupid, idiotic person ever. And so that's how I developed. And for me to medicate that bondage and feel like I could even talk or say words to anybody else, I consumed. So my bondage was there before I consumed. My bondage was the mastery of an enslavement of being less than nothing, no confidence, shamed. You know what I mean? So I medicated those things until I couldn't reach a limit high enough to medicate. And then the other thing, I think, the other principle that I really think is powerful, and I'm pretty confident that there's probably not very little, if any, addiction people that aren't harboring some kind of unforgiveness. So I think forgiveness, knowing that we are forgiving and giving that back to where it needs to be given, is absolutely essential. And those are the things that I hope to draw men to work on. And there's nothing easy about it. There's nothing easy about it at all.
Yeah.
And there's nothing easy about, going from the dark closets and mayhem of addiction, because we all know how dark and shameful addiction can take somebody all of a sudden, and then all of a sudden, into God's word, which I'm getting a lot of pushback on that right now, calling it religion and stuff like that instead of relationship. And I really, I could be wrong, but I feel like I have survived all that I have survived to help men, because I've been in numerous penitentiaries. I've been in even more numerous county jails. I've been in numerous hospitals and rehabs, inpatient, outpatient. And I've been around men my whole life through addiction. I've known thousands of addicts. And I know that 80+% of prison population has something to do with addiction and drugs and alcohol. And I just feel like this is what I want to help men, but I want to do this service and thankfulness and worship to God for what He's brought me through. For me to sit here and think and formulate thought and communicate to you after all that I have been through, you would never believe that I could do this.
Yeah.
And so this is my goal. This is what I'm looking out to do.
Is this your
sorry.
Go
ahead.
What are you sorry for? Don't be sorry.
I'm sorry that I haven't even let you talk hardly at all. But
it's funny because before this, I'm like, I'm not going to talk about myself at all. I'm going to listen. I'm going to let them talk, because sometimes I feel like I talk too much about myself. But in this case, I don't have drug addiction or alcoholism as something I personally can relate to, which is why I, like to have people on that have different experiences than I've had.
Yes.
So, some of the things that were coming into my mind as you were talking, though, one thing is you said that you put a lot of effort into being an alcohol or into being an addict. And I thought that I'm like, yeah, you know, you wouldn't think that. You wouldn't think that an an addict is putting in effort to be an addict, but
Oh,
you really do. And you kind of explained the ways how. So I think
oh
that's
yeah.
kind of surprising.
When I
Right.
reminisce on, yeah, when I reminisce on the oddities and the craziness that I went, the finagling
Yeah.
and the mind control and the things I would, lie to people about
The
just so I could,
manipulation.
yeah, the manipulation
Mm-hmm.
was insane. But yeah, I worked no harder at anything else than to figure out how I would continue to use.
Yeah.
And and it's like I can't
I
even imagine that now.
I hope that somebody in the throes of addiction can hear that and understand that
Right.
and really realize that they can redirect all that energy someplace else. But it's not easy. Like you said, it's not going to be easy. And
No,
I don't
it's
ever
not.
want to say that, but it's worth it, right?
It is. It is so worth it because I literally have freedom. I have not only freedom, but I have real thoughts. I have real hopes. I have real dreams. I really do. I
You
have
have a
things.
future.
I do. I have all of that. And it's been work at that too, because it took a long time to come over debt. It took a long
Yeah.
time to battle through this and that. But when you see it happening and you feel good and you're waking up without shame and without trying to remember something from a blackout, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so much better. Not only that, but you have a relationship with your maker. And nobody is ever here without a purpose. He knew us and formed us in our mother's womb in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. He knew us before he knit us in our womb. That's how good and how big our God is. And that is, and when we draw to him and then he draws us in because we draw for him, it is amazing. It is so worth the pursuit. And that's what he wants, God's love is agape, it's unconditional. But when you think about unconditional love, it's like a mirroring image. The Greek term for a marital love is called eros. And it's literally chasing after the fulfillment of your mate. And the exact same thing happens back to that one who's chasing after that fulfillment. And that is God. That is what he is with us. The more we chase him, it reciprocates right back to us. And there's times that it's harder than other times. There really is. And then there's times that you don't even feel like you deserve that kind of grace. But I really, I mean, I'm just going to tell you, I, it's not, I don't even have, I want this so much that I already know how painful it's going to be. I know how much slack I'm going to take from it. I know that it's going to be exhausting in a fight in so many ways with so many men, with so many different drugs that are used to be addicted to now. I already know all that, but I know every facet of addiction. I know every nook and cranny of everything to it. And I just want to humbly and in humility help men with this. And I really just want men to be honest with themselves and want help. And, if I want them to want help where they want it, but I want to be trusted to help them, but I don't want to force myself at all. I just really,
Right.
I look forward to, reaching out. And I've slowed way down on my site recently. I haven't posted any recent blogs or anything. And because I got into a discouragement phase, but
It
I
happens.
and yeah,
I've been
but
there.
I had to go back into some other things like the workplace and and some other things like that. So I've just been really consumed with time, but I still want this. I still believe God has enabled me through this process to have what I have. And I want this more than anything. I want this. I want to cry with, I want to pray with men. I want to hear everything they got to say, because I didn't have anybody to say it to many, many times. And that's what I want. That's just what I really want.
So a question I had before we actually got on here, after looking at your website and looking at your bio, is how does your program differ from AA, from an AA? AA is a spiritual, I know they say whatever, they don't specify a God. They just like whatever, spiritual thing you want to look at. But, for the most part, it's God, right? So how does your program differ? And I know you mentioned not wanting to do the steps. And
so in essence, my program, the contrast between the two, or there's many contrasts, but first and foremost, it's I strictly biblical based, because God's word is the foundation. It's the foundation. It's the standard in which he gave us to find him, to pursue him, to learn from him, to seek, knock, and ask, as it tells us in Matthew 7:7, I think. But so I also made a mention that the program really, they give you an identity as having disease, and it's not your fault. You're not accountable. You have a disease. You grew up with 7 generations of alcoholism and things like that. I won't cater to that. I just won't, because we are very conscious well-beings to throw that down. And if other family members and other people can do it, then anybody can. You're not locked. We're not built with, alcohol chromosomes and cells that doesn't let us walk in a world without going to the liquor store and getting a bottle. That's what the program has, infiltrated, doctrinated rather, in a lot of the program, attendees' minds. They think that we're that without choice, and I will not cater to that. I won't be harsh against it, but you can, you know what I mean? It's just, that's not what I believe. I don't believe that. And I don't believe there isn't anything that we can't be freed from when we seek our master. Our master, we gave, this starts back in the beginning of chapter 3 of Genesis, when Adam and Eve, went against God's will and decided they wanted to seek and know all that God knows, by eating of the fruit of tree of knowledge. So it's just been since then. And so my program is biblical based. It's, I will go through the principles of that, the foundation of who we are, where we've come from, and how we can turn from. His kindness brings repentance. Repentance is turning away. And that's, it's basically, I don't even like to give it a term like a program, because that's what is so easily said. But I basically I'm leading, I want to lead men out of the world's way. The AA meetings, you still got guys going there cursing up and down, smoking this, smoking that, watching porn. Their lives aren't changing. They might be a dry drunk, or they might be just abstinent for a time, but this is a full life transformation. I want to help men see what freedom is. Freedom that would take them into an element that they would never even want to drink. You know what I mean? It's not even about so much the addiction, but it's about, because addiction in essence is idolatry. Idolatry is any person that is loved, sought for, and has been shown more affection than God himself. That's what idolatry is, and that's what addiction is, basically. And so it's not like I'm not developing a syllabus of contrast between what I'm offering and what AA is offering. I'm just not doing anything AA is doing because I know it inside out. I know it inside out. I truly do. I went to it willingly, inpatient and outpatient. And even more times I was court mandated, inpatient and outpatient. And I'm not saying that it's never helped nobody. I'm just saying I don't believe that it's ever done what I have been, that what I have gone through. I don't think it's ever been fully freed anybody. I just don't, because there's so many things that just aren't true about it. You know, when Bill W. created it, I think in 1935, it started out to be completely God-centered. And even, I'm not even calling it pure and good back then, but since then, it has just been taken from and deleted from and just so twisted and maneuvered around into what we see now with it. Mm-hmm. But
interesting. Wouldn't it be great if the courts would mandate an option of AA or going to
it would be
breakingbondagefromaddiction.com.
Right.
Put that out there. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be so awesome. And that's, it sounds ridiculous, but I would love some miracle to happen to even like all of a sudden see like bars lose business, or you know what I mean? I really would. I would love to see some powerful movement go through. I really would. In my
miracles do happen, right? You are a miracle.
I am. Not just once, many times. I really am. But in my site, I have a small little free PDF that's a reference for Unchanging Hope. And it's a list of scriptures, and it's a little saying before and after that, the word is that God's word is filled with everything that we go through in this life, in this broken, fallen world that we live in. His word says something about everything. I promise you it does. His word is rich, and that references some of the things that alcohol, addiction, people in addiction go through, and where God, can free this and help this. But I also have a small video that's about 3.5 or 4 minutes. But basically, I know my literature, or my website, is filled with literature, and a lot of people in the rough parts of either just sobering up or in full-blown addiction probably don't want to read, a whole bunch of stuff. So I made that little short video imploring them to go through some. You have any more questions?
Yes, I do. Okay, so great explanation of the, why this versus AA.
Right.
So you don't use the word alcoholism, but you do use the word addict.
I do use the word addiction. Yeah.
And addiction.
I use the word. Yeah. And addiction is everything. And people have asked me, are you going to try to help people with porn addiction? And, I'm not limiting, because I know what porn addiction is too, because alcohol addiction and drug addiction takes you to all kinds of things. So I understand that. And I'm not going to say, oh no, we're not talking about that. I'm not going to do that. But I know what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on substance abuse addiction, which is every drug and every drink there is. But I won't rule that stuff out. So
you're not going to turn someone away.
No, I'm not going to turn somebody away that is going through porn addiction. But if it started with and had something to do with. I mean, yeah, I would pray with them, talk with them, seek out what they had before this, and then what they're wanting, past this, and things like that. Absolutely. But I really want to build this team. I want to build, and a lot of people may not want a team in the beginning, and I realize that. I know how I was. I didn't want to confide in no one else. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I had so much to be ashamed of, so much that I didn't even remember because I used so much. I blacked out more than half the time. And so I know people are going to be sketchy per se. And that's where I invite, one-on-one for as long as it takes to, but eventually I think we do need community. I think other people need to know where other people are stronger and where some people are weaker. We need to, that's, God made us to, as iron sharpens iron, it says in Proverbs, that we use each other. We use each other. Someone can be a tool for someone else in a weak area, vice versa.
And that's exactly what this podcast is all about.
Exactly.
It's about showing people who are in the thick of it that there's a way out, and there's multiple ways out. I personally believe there are multiple ways out, and one of those ways is God. And I personally believe in God, but I also understand that some people may be turned off by that or scared away, or because they have this image in their head of what that looks like. And anyway, so I don't want to I just want people to figure it out and learn that there's a way. I mean, I imagine with you, there was, felony charges and, just the DUIs, losing your driver's license. It's like a spiraling thing where it's not just that the drinking, it's all those other things that come along with it, that now you're out of jail. You've paid the price for the things that you've done, remembered or not. But now you have this felony and you have no driver's license. And how do you get a job? How does somebody in that situation go out and get a job? I can imagine that being a huge reason why a lot of people relapse, because what else are they going to do?
Right. Yep.
What did you do?
I struggled. I will say, I got to be careful how I say this, but I come from a very tough background, and you worked because you had to work. And I already had felonies from a very young age. I was 18 years old, my first felonies, but I always went back to work. Whether or not it was a job I wanted, whether or not I was making what I wanted, I still got a job. I carried myself in a way that, and my demeanor of work ethic, I never really struggled too much with a job. Of course, I never got the money I ever wanted. I never had the position I wanted, maybe, but I still pressed on and worked, and I always was able to get to work. But you're right. People get disappointed from their mistakes, and I can relate with that 100% so many times. And when I say so many, that's an understatement. I would be I'd be like, I shouldn't even be alive, but I've already screwed this many things up. So how will I ever have any peace, or how will I ever come ahead? And so I might as well just give up again, and go back to the bottle again. Right. I've done that cycle over and over and over, and that's why God's mercy was so great on my behalf, because most people don't make it past all the things that I made it past. They really don't. And I don't think I'm exaggerating by that. I really don't.
I don't think you are either.
So when I know that, in my heart and in reality, that's why I continue to press on. That's why I continue to make what I'm trying to do a success. Even if I'm wrong in some way, there's a reason for this process. I must learn something else before I can make this a success, possibly. I don't know. Speak and answer on behalf of what you just said. that's what men will do. That's what people in addiction will do. They'll just give up again and go back to it because they don't see no hope. They don't see nothing offered. All they see is something that the court gives them that has to be signed. And I don't even know how it goes on anymore. I just know what it was like, 20 some years ago. And I'm sure the whole world's different now. I can imagine how much has changed in 20 years. But but yeah, people will just give up. And there's this, I don't even know this couple, but there's this couple that I know of, and somebody has led them to me, where they just had a baby less than a year ago. And the woman is a young woman. And I don't really want to, until I get much more mature in my purpose and what I want to do, I don't really want to do anything with women. I just really want to focus with men, because I think that's where it is my calling to to help lead men out of the bondage of addiction. So, but there's this lady who has kind of just left her man and started a drug that she got highly addicted into. And I was talking to her fiance, the guy, and I was explaining to him, the addiction process about this one drug, and trying to figure out what drew her this way and all this stuff. And I just, she basically, she has unresolved problems between her mother and her father, but different on both cases. And these things, just things that go unresolved for so many years, and you start building patterns, whether even if it's really even engaged addiction or not, there'll be patterns that will eventually lead to addiction. And I was, enlightening to some of these things, and he was just listening to me, and he was like drawing everything that I was telling him and stuff. And so we just got to build hope. We got to encourage. You got to build hope. And there is no direction greater for real hope than when we exercise our faith in our Maker. When I always, like I told you early in the beginning of this podcast, that I always had a God conscience, but I had the wrong conscience of who God was. I just, I grew up, in the 80s, and my idea of God was a big law slapping, you better obey or we're going to snuff you out and you're going straight to hell. You know what I mean? That was my idea of who God was. Never really understood God with love or grace or mercy.
Or grace. Yeah, the grace.
Yeah. Grace is unmerited favor. There's no way we can earn it. There's no way we can, no amount of right. Billy Graham was not good enough to earn God's grace. Nobody. Yeah. No one. And so when we see that, when we spiritually come into unison with that real truth, that's when we start to see the reality of who God is, and where he can take us and what he can do for us, but also not looking at what he can do for us, but just looking at him. Peter did fine taking a few steps on the water when he looked at Jesus, but when he looked away from Jesus because he felt the wind, is when he began to sink. So we always look at him. We always look at him. We always call out to him. We always seek him. We always inquire. We always ask. We knock. And we call out always. And he is there. Sometimes it's not our timing. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's not our timing or our understanding. But it is him. He is the central focus. And,
well, I believe he's definitely calling you for this and to do this. And I know that I stepped away from my podcast for a while, for a few months, and just got discouraged from it. And I'm sure, like, what's going to happen with you if it's not happening already, signs will show you, this is what you're supposed to do. Get back to it. Don't give up. Because, I mean, the most successful people in the world weren't successful the first time they tried.
Right.
You know,
There's lots of mistakes to make.
Yeah, totally. And you learn from those mistakes and you move on from those mistakes, and you don't have regret. No regret. Oh, it's over there. No regret. Right. You know? One question I like to ask all of my guests is, where do you think your strength comes from? I think I know the answer in your case, but where do you think your strength comes from to just push on and keep going and keep going and keep going?
Yeah, you already know the answer, but a little bit more than just, him and his forgiveness and his, he casts our sins as far as the east is from the west, and he truly doesn't bring them back to us. If we remember them, or if we go back to beating ourselves up, it's the enemy. It's not him. He has forgiven us. And so when I relish back into his forgiveness, and even for the continual present sins that I fall into, and just know that he forgives us, I stay conscious of that. And when I stay conscious of that, then I can still move forward. But I really want to give my my future wife, I don't call her my fiance right now because we haven't set a date, and we haven't done that part of it. But she is definitely the woman I'm going to marry. She is someone who she has pushed me this far to do what I'm doing, and to increase in this passion to do what I'm doing. And she is someone who doesn't even understand addiction, or has never come from it in no way, shape, or form. She's been on the other side of that whole world of addiction, but yet she has sacrificially loved me ongoingly, and pushed me to see this fulfilling me, see this passion in me to continue to do what I'm doing. So that's one thing also I want to mention.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She's wonderful. She really
Sounds like it. Just a couple other little questions I had. One, are you still in touch with the victim's mother?
I'm glad you asked that. I absolutely am. In fact, I may call her tonight. I missed her call. She called me. We don't talk on the phone often, but she called me one day last week, and we were helping a elderly couple friends we know. And she called me, and I just missed her call. It was a very hectic night, and I had forgot about it for several days, and I was going to call her tonight. But yes, I am. I stayed in contact. I wrote her the entire time I was in prison. She wrote back. I still have many of her cards and letters. And we write, and I send her cards now, all the way up until now. And this has been, like I said, almost 20 years. She's suffered some health troubles since then. She's getting much older, as we all are. So, but yes, I'm still in contact with her, and it's a blessing. It's such a blessing.
She must be like as close to a saint as you can get.
Yeah.
Like she sounds amazing. Like talking about her, that's what's going to bring tears to my eyes. Cause wow.
I know.
She's got to be amazing. And what about the son? Did you continue a relationship with him, or?
No, it just dissolved instantly. It really did. After that accident, the woman who I was in a relationship with at that time was already breaking up and separating. She was no one I should have ever been with, and I knew that at that time. But after the accident, all ties were severed. I never saw him or her again from that moment on. The boy now is well into he's probably
almost
29.
30.
Yeah, almost 30 years old now. So I don't know his life or where he's at.
Well, hopefully he's okay.
Yeah.
We'll pray for him.
Yes, we have. I still do.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I learned a new word today, and that word is zeroth. And it
Zeroth?
means zeroth. Yeah. I was
I
thinking
know.
about it. I was like, I was going to say, what would you tell somebody is the first step to, um, to finding that freedom and to breaking the bondage. And I'm like, well, the first step is to go to breaking bondage from addiction.com. So the zeroth step, because zeroth is the step that comes before the first step. What would you tell somebody as the zeroth step?
Um, just to be honest with themselves. To be honest with themselves, take a pause, a long pause in most cases, and just to be honest with themselves to see, because in addiction, I'm the first one to know and admit that we see repetitive failures over and over. It's not just once or twice or this one time, or it's usually, if they're in real addiction, it's usually consistent over and over failures or lies or something that one does to cover up or something. There's always a malpractice consistently because of addiction. So I just say to take a pause and look and do a self-evaluation of, you know what I mean? Even, if you were to tell me that, I'm trying to understand how I would take that, because my addiction started so young. I was in junior high, middle school, and it was radical. It just increased so hard and so fast that I don't even know if I would be able to contemplate that. But I think it's important. I think because I got sent to lockup, I got sent to jail, and I did little 6 months in prison, a little time here and there. And these were places that God allowed me to get locked up. People used to blame the system or blame how they got caught or whatever. But I easily learned and accepted early on that He blessed me to get locked up. I did too. I used to blame the system that I didn't have a paid lawyer. I had a public defender, and that's why I got locked up. But in essence, I got locked up because God knew what I was doing to my body with the amount that I consumed. And plus, He gave me that dry out time to really self-evaluate. So even though I didn't change, even though I didn't make radical change or surrender or give up and turn a new way, so many times I had little short stints between 6 months and a year to evaluate what was going on with me. Why? Sadly enough, I always thought I could control it or still use and function right. But that long pause is necessary. You really have to, in truth, you have to self-evaluate yourself and look at the ramifications of where you're going, where it's went already, where's it going to go, how are you going to change it and still use X, Y, and Z at the quantity that you're using it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the answer is you're not.
You're not.
I mean, the answer to that is you're not. But I think to add to that, if I may.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because I'm so glad that was your answer to that question, because I'm a huge believer in, self-awareness and understanding,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term of locus of control, an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. And it sounds like you've managed to change your mindset from an external to an internal, meaning I am in control of this. These are things I've done, and you can't control other people, but other people aren't controlling you either. You ultimately have the control to make the changes and do the things that are necessary, but you have to have the self-awareness, the self-reflection that you're talking about, and being truth and honest with yourself to be able to make those changes. So I love
absolutely
that was your answer there.
And I love how you sharpened that answer for me. That was a beautiful way about the internal and the external. It was perfect.
Yeah. And I think that locus of control is where is a trap that a lot of people get stuck in.
Right.
Yeah. I can't get clean because I have a felony on my record and I can't get a job. I can't do this because of that. I can't do that because of this. No, you can. You really can.
Yeah.
And you're living proof.
Yes. And you can always find someone else who's even done more in worse circumstances. There's always an illustration. Yes. And overcome it. There's always someone or something that has done more and through more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's got to start in the heart. It's like I tell everybody, it starts in the heart. You know what I mean? It really does. It's got to start in your heart. And if you really want to do it, if you really want to make the change, you can.
Yes.
You can.
Yeah. If there's one word I have to sum up this episode, would be hope.
Yes.
There's hope.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of your evening and get back to your one-day wife, not fiance. And I really, really, really appreciate you. And I wish you all the luck. And I'll pray for you and pray for your site and your non-program. And because I think you have the passion, and I really think this is it's gonna go somewhere for you. Don't give up.
I'm not giving up. I'm looking to God in it. I'm praying to him to take me through where he wants me to take me through, and in his process, and hopefully that I yield to whatever it is I might need to be more obedient with. So things like that. It's all little factors. But thank you so much for hosting me tonight, Tammy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very
it's my
grateful.
Pleasure.
All right.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too. Good night.
Good night. This has been a Without Regret production. For show notes and resources, visit withoutregretpodcast.com. Senior producer is Tamara Albrecht. Our theme song is by Michael Berguglio. Artwork is by Tamara Albrecht. Executive produced by Tamara Albrecht. You can follow us on Facebook at withoutregretpodcast.com and on Instagram at without_regret_podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.